I woke up this morning and I saw the announcement of the passing of boxing legend Smoking Joe Frazier at 67. He was battling liver cancer. And a few things ran through my head. Now, Joe Frazier was before my time. I was maybe a baby. I wasn't even born when they had when he had his first fight with Muhammad Ali at Madison Square Garden in 1971. I was born in 1974. But I've used to be really into boxing until about the mid-90s. And I read a lot on the background of the heavyweights. And I always felt Joe Frazier never got the credit he deserved from the public, particularly from the black community. Let me go back and say what I'm talking about. Joe Frazier became the heavyweight champion of the world in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in there, after Muhammad Ali was stripped of the title for not going to Vietnam. And while he was impressive and undefeated, many of the public considered him just a paper champion, sadly, and that he would never get the credit he deserved until he fought Muhammad Ali, a match that Joe Frazier wanted to see happen. And what's little known is during those 3 years that Muhammad Ali was on the shelf because he couldn't box, he couldn't do anything, one of the people that helped him financially was Joe Frazier. This was a man who knew about hard times. And not saying that Muhammad Ali didn't, or not saying Muhammad Ali didn't go through racism or anything like that, but Joe Frazier, he grew up a sharecropper's son down in the Carolinas, I believe South Carolina. I mean, anyone that's ever lived anywhere from southern West Virginia on down, anyone black or a minority, they know what I'm talking about, especially if they grew up in that generation. So Joe Frazier, he somehow got to Philadelphia, built himself up to be able to fight, went on to become the heavyweight champion from being a man who was like dirt poor, who worked in a meat market just to support himself and to be able to support his boxing career until he hit it big. Now, there's an American story right there. A man who pretty much came from nothing, and became heavyweight champion of the world. Now, fast forward to the first fight with Muhammad Ali. Coming into this was easily, from what I've seen of films and from promos, this was easily one of the most electrifying, if I can borrow a phrase from The Rock, this was easily one of the most electrifying build-ups to anything, any sporting event, any wrestling event, any concert, anything. This was one of the best build-ups to an event that I've ever seen. It was more than just a fight. And plus, you still had the racial animosity, and you still had the political animosity. Ali was embraced by most black Americans. While Joe Frazier, while I'm sure he still had respect from the black community, he was viewed as an Uncle Tom, as quote unquote the white man's champion. And that had to be so disheartening to a man like Joe Frazier, because Joe Frazier grew up with the black experience in America a lot closer than Muhammad Ali did. Not saying, like, again, not saying that Muhammad Ali did not go through some trying times. He did. But Joe Frazier lived the black experience a lot closer to Muhammad Ali, yet he was being called the white man's champ. And that had to eat at a proud man like him. It had to. I know it would me. But the fight itself, by the time the fight came around, both of these guys were ready. And I had the privilege of seeing the whole fight about a couple of years ago. And let me tell you, that thing was electric. Back and forth. I mean, Muhammad Ali would dominate the early rounds, but as the rounds went on, Joe Frazier kept going toe-to-toe and even took a few rounds from Ali. And then came that moment, and I believe the 14th round, when Muhammad Ali went in for the kill. Joe Frazier slipped a punch and hit him with his vaunted and well-feared left hook right to the jaw. It was the perfect shot, right on the chin. Boom! Knocked Ali, and I'm going to put it bluntly, knocked Ali flat on his ass. To Ali's credit, the minute his back hit the ground, he got up immediately after that and took the standing 8 count. Now, this is about Joe Frazier, but let me talk about Muhammad Ali a little bit there. Any other boxer would have got hit with a perfect punch like that. Oh, the match would have been over right there. He'd have been down. Muhammad Ali got up almost immediately, which that in itself was incredible. Anyway, the fight went on. It ended. It went the full distance. Joe Frazier retained the heavyweight championship of the world. And by doing so, he became the first man ever to defeat Muhammad Ali. Thus, at least in my view, and I know I wasn't alive for that generation, but in my view, thus proving he deserved that World Heavyweight Championship. Then, of course, over the years, he would go on to lose that heavyweight championship shortly after that first fight against George Foreman in a very devastating two-rounder, which really should have been ended in the first round because, quite honestly, Foreman beat that ass. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm showing respect to Joe Frazier, but I got to tell it like it is. George Foreman beat him down. I mean, it was awful. And then he would go on to a second fight with Muhammad Ali, which isn't as talked about, but it was almost as thrilling as the first fight. But of course, Muhammad Ali got his revenge, won that one. Then came the thriller in Manila after Ali defeated Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle in Kinshasa, Zaire in 1975, I believe. It might have been 74. I'm not sure. I have to look that up. I'm sure one of y'all, if you comment on this, you'll look down below and you'll correct me on it. But I do know after that fight, they would go on to have the Thriller in Manila, which many thought was going to be an easy fight for Muhammad Ali because Joe Frazier, by that point, was considered washed up. He was done. But then he would put on, in my opinion, the fight of his life, as well as Muhammad Ali in Manila. And it's amazing both men did not, one of those guys, if not both, did not die that night. I mean, it was that punishing. And from what they said, the heat around, in and around that arena was terrible. It was awful. And being that I work in a media business where lights are essential, I've been in TV studios. People don't understand those lights needed to light up that studio create tremendous heat. Now, all I'm talking about is anchors that sit on the desk for 30 minutes or so on a desk. I can only imagine what it was like to be sitting under lights like that, maybe twice that, and be fighting somebody. You're exhausted from just the, just from the physicality, and you're losing fluids, and you got somebody pounding on you. It had to be hell. It had to be like being in hell for those guys. Of course, as we know, Muhammad Ali went on and won that, and Joe Frazier retired shortly after that. Muhammad, as we know, went on fighting, which I have to say led to the condition that he's in now. But back to Joe Frazier. Over the years, while Joe Frazier retired gracefully, he still had bitterness against Muhammad Ali until maybe a couple of years ago when he finally let it go. Which I do honor him for that, which I do give props to him for doing that, because no anger, no matter how justified, is worth hanging on to. At some point, it eats away at your soul. It can eat away at your health if you don't let it go. And I am glad the last few years he managed to find a way to let it go. Now, prior to that, though, he was very bitter against Muhammad Ali. And I can't say it was totally unjustified. It wasn't. Because Muhammad was very cruel towards Joe in build-ups, particularly Thrilla in Manila. Talking about the gorilla and this and that. And people was just eating it up. And that had to eat at Joe Frazier too. That people, especially black people, was eating this up. Now, the whole thing is it's going to be a killer and a chiller and a thriller when I get the gorilla in Manila. Now, people just laughed and everything. And, my Muhammad's so witty. But I got to thinking about it. If that would have been a white man that would have said that, we wouldn't have been laughing at that shit. No. And I know some people say, well, he just had to get past that. Move on. Well, people that say that, they're entitled to their opinion. But sometimes I wonder if the reason they say that about Muhammad is, are they Muhammad Ali marks? Or they feel that way because they're probably one of the ones, maybe growing up in school or growing up in college, they were the ones doing the bullying or the name calling or the taunting. But that had to eat at a proud man like Frazier. It had to. I know it wouldn't be. And I always felt Joe Frazier never got the credit due him, at least not until recent years. But in my personal opinion, as much as I love and respect Muhammad Ali, if there had been no Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali's legacy would have been nowhere near as great as it is. I would even go so far as to say, without Joe Frazier, there is no Muhammad Ali. Now, some people, I might get some thumbs down for that opinion. I might get some arguments for that opinion, but I'm not taking that back. I'll go so far as to say, without Joe Frazier, there is no Muhammad Ali. Period. I mean, it's just like the Boston Celtics legacy, especially in the 80s. Without the LA Lakers, it might not have been as great as they were in the 80s. I would say that about the Lakers too. Without Boston, it might not have been as great as they were. The Chicago Bulls, my all-time favorite team. Without the Detroit Pistons, their legacy might not be as cemented as it is. Particularly Michael Jordan's. Because everyone needs that great, every hero or every protagonist needs that great antagonist. Without them, they're nothing. Or if I can use a pro wrestling analogy, everybody talks about how great, for example, Stone Cold Steve Austin was. And he was. He was great. But to me, his career wouldn't have been too much without The Rock, in my view. Without The Rock being there, it wouldn't have been a whole lot. Or to use another wrestling example, Hulk Hogan. Without great antagonists like Paul Orndorff or Rowdy Roddy Piper or Andre the Giant or the late Macho Man Randy Savage, without those guys, Hogan's career wouldn't have been as great as it was, as big as Hulkamania was at that point. Every great fighter or every great sports team or every great performer, that's what I consider pro wrestlers. Not they're athletic to a point, but they're at the end of the day performers and entertainers. Every great entertainer needs that rivalry. Or like, for example, as great as Michael, and this might be a little bit of a stretch, but you'll get the idea. Like Michael Jackson. Would he have been as talked about or as great as he was if he didn't have the comparisons to Prince? It's kind of the same thing. But back to Joe Frazier. I'm getting a little off track here. Joe Frazier was not only a great champion, in my opinion, even though I never met the man or knew the man, he was a class act and he was a great man. And even though I respect the legacy of Muhammad Ali and love it, and this is me speaking as a black man, I think Joe Frazier's legacy and example to black Americans should be lauded just as much, if not a little bit more, than Muhammad Ali. And again, I might get some hate mail, I might get some hate comments, I might get some thumbs down for saying that, but that's how I feel. That's how I've always felt. In a way, I've always been a bigger Joe Frazier fan than I was a Muhammad Ali fan, even though I love watching Muhammad Ali's fights. And I love watching his interviews and watching specials on him. I've always been a bigger Joe Frazier fan. Well, that's all I got to say. Leave your comments down below, make a video response. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. And God bless Joe Frazier. Rest in peace, man.
Joe Frazier jumps out the closet